Good evening, everybody. A little bit louder, please. Good evening, everybody. All right, that's more like it. On behalf of the entire library staff, I wanted to welcome you to the William H. Hennon Library. My name is Ray Andrade, a LMU alumnus who now very eagerly serves as the university's programming librarian. So again, welcome to tonight's event, where we welcome Professor of Theological Studies, Cecilia González-Andrieu, who's going to be talking about her latest work, Bridge to Wonder, Art as a Gospel of Beauty. It's going to be she and her colleagues up for tonight for a very, very special event. But before we begin the formal part of the program, I did want to point out a few things about tonight's event. On your seats, you should see some small feedback forms. If anybody is interested in a $100 gift card from Amazon, and you should be, especially you students in the room, if you want one of those gift cards, you want to fill those out and include your email address. So please provide us with your feedbacks to make sure that we're on the ball and doing our job properly, okay? Secondly, a quick word about the words faculty pub night. Like you hopefully figured out, it doesn't mean that it's for faculty only. So it's for the entire community, and by the word pub, pub is a play on words, as in publication, not just booze over here in the corner, okay? So during the event, it's going to be a casual setting, so during the event, you're more than welcome to grab a drink and grab some food at any time, okay? At the very end, we are reserving some time for some Q&A, so please hold your questions until the end of the formal program. And there is also a book sale that is going to be going on as well, and the author is going to remain in the room to autograph those books for you at the end. Okay, so let's get this party started. I wanted to welcome to the front the director of our Archives and Special Collections Department, Cynthia Becht.
Hi, everyone. It is my honor to introduce to you Cecilia González-Andrieu of the Department of Theological Studies, who, among the many wonderful faculty I have been privileged to work with, remains one of the most inspiring, innovative, envelope-pushing, and magical people I have ever known. I met Cecilia many years ago now, when she first returned, even before her first semester back, after receiving her doctorate from the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley. I say back because she is an LMU alum. She, at that point, was the one who introduced me to the emerging field of theological aesthetics. She's one of the earliest and leading developers of that discipline. And the more I learned from Cecilia about theological aesthetics, I have to say, the more I realize it's difficult for me to articulate it, what it means in a sentence or two. It's instead for me a holistic experience of the intellect and pretty much everything else that makes us human. I always end up seeing art and objects, especially commonplace objects, with new eyes and new understanding. I love to talk with Cecilia. Every time I do, I feel words like splendor, wonder rushing into my brain during our talk. And I'm looking forward to feeling that rush again tonight when she gives her talk. Cecilia has asked a lot of me and my department over the years, all on behalf of her students, in order to give them a riveting educational experience. We've negotiated and retrieved artwork on loan to the president's office for her. We've staged living museum-like class visit displays, replete with a mannequin dressed in a vestment. These are just a couple of the things she's asked us to do. But in return, Cecilia has given us 100-fold of herself in numerous ways, including co-curating a gallery exhibit on celebrating the liturgy. And by co-curating, I mean she wrote the lead intro text, which gave the whole theme to the exhibit. She loaned artworks from her own collection. She facilitated the loan of other amazingly precious objects from others. She consulted on every level in that exhibit. She also co-planned with Barbara Rico and myself just a couple years ago on a very memorable St. John's Bible event that was an all-day multi-work moment. And a little while ago, a few years ago, she created a 2-day theological aesthetics conference which showcased the art of John August Swanson, who when I wrote that did not know was going to be sitting right here, but that was a wonderful, wonderful introduction to both his work and the discipline of theological aesthetics and what it means. And as part of that conference, she made sure that our Department of Archives and Special Collections was also showcased, so that on the second day, our artworks were visited by the participating academics and the artist, and the resulting discussion I will never forget. It was intense and exhilarating. So again, everything is a big experience. She's introduced artwork from our collections to our campus president, then Father Lawton. But the real winners have always been Cecilia's students. They have often been the first explorers of artifacts in our collection that had lain dormant for decades. They have transformed and stretched their learning with on-the-spot, no preparation theological analyses of art. They have created art in response to our works. Does that ring a bell? And I'm very happy to see among them a returning student, Marissa Munalal, who, when she was an undergraduate here, worked very closely with one of our artworks and did profound research and work with it. So, you know, I could go on forever, but I think it's time for me to share Cecilia with you and get on with the program. So please join me in welcoming Cecilia to the podium, where she will be introducing to us her recent book, Bridge to Wonder, Art as a Gospel of Beauty. Cecilia.
Let me hear you say something. Testing. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. It's, you know, if you are ever looking for me on campus and can't find me, I'm probably here, because I just absolutely love everything that we have in our archives. So tonight, I'm actually kind of celebrating three things. Obviously, I'm celebrating books and interdisciplinary scholarship, and you know, that something like this doesn't happen by yourself. An author does not do the work alone, and obviously I needed the support of my college, the BCLA, who gave me a semester junior sabbatical so that I could finish the book. The Graduate Theological Union of Berkeley, which is where I studied and kind of began this really exploration of this field with some of the most wonderful, great, amazing scholars. The Hispanic Theological Initiative in Princeton, now that's an organization that supports doctoral scholars who are Latinas and Latinos. It's celebrating its anniversary this year. I think it's its 20th. And in that amount of time has managed to help graduate 50 scholars in the United States in theology and religion. And then my publisher, right, Baylor University Press, and my students and I are involved in a little publishing project of our own. And you know, publishing is a complicated field, but it's so much fun when you get to do it with like really amazing, terrific people, which Baylor University Press is one of the most wonderful presses that anyone could work with. And then, of course, I'm writing a book about art as the gospel of beauty. I need artists. And two of them especially have been just extremely generous with their work. John August Swanson, who's joining us here today, and I'm very honored always by his presence. And then Sergio Gomez. Sergio is a young artist in Chicago with just an incredible following and an incredible career, who I had the pleasure of actually having the two of them together at a conference, and that was just an amazing moment. And then, of course, the great dramatist Luis Valdez, because one of the chapters goes into drama, because what I do is I am an equal opportunity arts lover, right? So it's not just paintings, it's not just sculptures, it's not just music, it's all of them, because it's the aesthetic experience that I explore. And then right there I have the cover art. That's my father. And I actually brought the painting so that you could see it, and it's back there by the books. So that's the original that the cover is from. Everybody always tells me that cover is so gorgeous, so I thought I'd bring the art. I am also obviously celebrating LMU's collection. I mean, we just have an extremely amazing collection that I just, like I said, I tell Cynthia, I need several lifetimes to be able to look at the materials that we have here and do the kind of research that I would love to do with them. So if you haven't been in there and you haven't had a chance, please go. They have an incredibly wonderful exhibit going on right now. Very interesting and decentering with all of the stuff about death and time, and really great. And then, as my class knows, we will in a year's time, in spring 18, our class will actually be the featured exhibit. The artwork from my Meeting Christ in Faith and Art course this semester and the next semester, we will choose from there. So we will have a semester where we will be exhibited as well. So it's wonderful to collaborate with this department. And then, of course, I have to celebrate my students. Yeah, I know you guys didn't know I was going to use this. But, a scholar is not really complete until students are reacting to the work, are taking the work in, are adding to it, are asking really insightful questions, and are taking it the next step. And that's why I'm excited, because I'm involving them in what we're doing tonight, because that's the future of the field. It's our students and the formation that they're receiving. The book is an intellectually curious exploration into a developing field, and it's really a field that's gotten a lot of attention recently and is growing a lot. But as Cynthia said before, what is it? And whenever I say theological aesthetics, people normally kind of look quizzically at me, like, what does that mean? So I'm going to try to help us with that, right? I'm not going to rehearse the book, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of the broad themes through the questions that I'm going to pose. So one of the things that it is not is the intersection of art and religion. That is the way that this has been referred to so often and by everyone, and there's lots of books about intersection of art and religion. And the problem with intersections, as you can see there, is they begin apart and they end apart. They just kind of meet in a little spot in the middle, where maybe the art historian and the theologian agree, oh yeah, that's a crucifixion, right? But the art historian may be talking about some very valid things about form and time and history, etc. And the theologian will go off into a whole thing about, soteriology and how Christ saves and all this stuff. And never the two shall meet except for that minute where they kind of converge. And theologians have been very guilty often of just using the arts as illustrations, right? We're going to talk about Christ, so let's put a picture of Christ up. And that's not what it is. That's not what we're doing. So one of the things we did, and you guys all know the word because you've learned it, is we changed the language to interlacing. And this came out of the work I was doing with Alejandro Garcia Rivera up at the GTU. And we said, that philosophically, when you have an argument that is made up of multiple strands, right, and that you can weave these together, you have something a lot sturdier, a lot more interesting. And so we have theology, we have the arts, we have religion, which is the way we live out some of our theological commitments. But the kind of the unifying strand that helps kind of hold it all together is aesthetics. And the aesthetics is the way that we talk about these things that are not going to be incomprehensible to the other field. You know, rather than saying soteriology, we might say, you know, the unending love that pours forth from Christ. And that language pouring forth and what we feel in that as we look at a painting will help us to kind of converge the two. So the field then is theological aesthetics. And the question then becomes, well, why should we work in this, right? I mean, there's so much urgent stuff going on in the world. And I am, you know, I am a woman of color, a minority theologian with a community that's suffering. Why would I spend time doing this? And that was a very important question that we really worked on. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk why, because this is kind of what you will find in the book as I work out all of these whys. And for that, we have a little bit of a text.
Never has the human race enjoyed such an abundance of wealth, resources, and economic power. And yet, a huge proportion of the world's citizens are still tormented by hunger and poverty, while countless numbers suffer from total illiteracy. Never before has humanity had some keen understanding of freedom, yet at the same time, new forms of social and psychological slavery make their appearance.
Although the world of today has a very vivid awareness of its unity and how one person depends on another in mutual solidarity, it is most grievously torn into opposing camps by conflicting forces. The political, social, economic, racial, and ideological disputes still continue bitterly, and with them the peril of a war, which would reduce everything to ground. True, there is a growing exchange of ideas, but the very words by which key concepts are expressed take on quite different meanings than a diverse ideological system. Finally, humanity painstakingly searches for a better world without a corresponding spiritual attainment.
So as we read this text in class, my beautiful students from Care of Our Common Home, we agreed, right, that yeah, this is what our world looks like. This is what our world feels like. But then I disclosed to them what this text is. Does anybody recognize what this text is, where it came from? (1965). 1965, the Pastoral Constitution in the modern world from the Second Vatican Council. Since 1965, we have been talking about the pain and the suffering and the separation and the way that we don't seem as a human community to be able to overcome all that. And I know that they all gasped when we realized it was 1965. Right? So that's why. That's why. And so theological aesthetics asks the question, what do you do in such a world? What do we do in such a world? Because the Constitution on the modern world asked us to engage that world, to really engage it, to not just preach at it or judge it, but to be part of it and mesh with it, listening to it. And so I developed this idea of bridge. And of course, I was going to school in Berkeley and looking across the bay at this extraordinary work of human ingenuity, which really brings together the natural world of that beautiful bay and its opening with human ingenuity with the Golden Gate. And as I was doing one of my many visits to the bridge, I saw that there's a section where they show what the cable is, that cable that's holding all of that together. And it's made up of tiny, tiny little cables, 30,000 of them, all bundled together. Right? And this gave me the way to talk about what I think we need to be doing. And so interlace cables, right? they can hold up a lot, and yet they're very nimble. They move easily. They can deal with the wind and the heat and everything, because the bridge goes up and down depending on how hot it is. Okay? And it also lets us cross this really huge expanse. So what do we do then? We create a bridge and we try to cross some expanses. And so I'm going to talk about a number of expanses that I try to cross in the book. And the first one is the expanse of time and place. And that would be best seen in something like this, right? So can you guys tell what painting he's looking at? Right here, yeah? Okay, so time and place. And he's standing there in this beautiful museum, the National Gallery. What am I looking at? And unless we have done the work, right, I have actually heard a documentary cameraman say, oh, it's the lady with the kid. Right? That's what it could get reduced to, right? But if we do the work, right, and my students in Meeting Christ in Faith and Art are doing heavy lifting on understanding the Christological underpinnings of all of this work. If we do the work, then it starts speaking. It's not the lady and the kid. And if we go even further, right, then we can put together a surprising and awe-making experience when we realize that Bellini did these two mirror images of the infant Christ and the dead Christ. If you hold them up like this, right, they'll be mirrors. And he did them in the same time, encompassing just this heartbreak of this mother who is not smiling much in the first one. Why isn't she smiling? Well, you need the second one. You need the full story. Okay? And so part of the expanse we're trying to bridge is this expanse, right? The expanse that's going to make the great works of art that are all over our world continue to speak. And the National Gallery, I have a chapter devoted to it in the book. The National Gallery did a really groundbreaking exhibition where they actually placed all of this art about Christ not in order of chronology or artists, but as to what they were saying Christologically about Christ. And it's a stunning example of interlacing the theological and the artistic. And we're working on this in our other class, on this particular book. So the why here then is to allow the world's great art to continue speaking meaningfully. Because otherwise we could end up without knowing what our greatest art in the world means or is. So it's very important work. So the second expanse is the expanse between church and culture. Okay? Because we can't, as beautiful as Carmel Mission is, and any of our churches are, it's not only happening in there, the speaking religiously, but it's also out here. And my students have been doing field work and researching out in the city. They took this gorgeous photograph of one of the murals. Where were you guys for that? Is anybody here? Where were you, Gabby? In East LA. So it's also here. And we need to be able to relate to it, right? Because it's going to be in street art. Street art's going to be saying things that we profoundly need to engage with. It's going to be in pop culture. It's going to be in music. And in music, not just Bach cantatas. It's going to be in music everywhere, in creative expressions, right? And it's going to be in films. And they're not have to be biblically themed or even have Christ in them. As a matter of fact, often if they don't, they're even speaking more profoundly because they're speaking about Christ incarnated in a culture. So to do this work means we go out and find these treasures. So we want to be able to engage the world's joys and sorrows wherever they're found. And they're not only going to be found in church. And this is very crucial for our work. The third expanse we want to cover is between faith traditions. And for this, I've just had a marvelous time being invited to really radically ecumenical, going to places that, Grand Rapids with the the Calvinists and to all of these different groups where we all want to talk about the good and the true, and we can do it through the beautiful. And so we are able to create these spaces that are very radically mixed in, right? And so we can have ecumenical, this was what happened in Grand Rapids, ecumenical conversations around art, and John was a part of that wonderful conference. We can do it so that it becomes interreligious. And this was a conference in Berkeley, right? So where we had Buddhists and we had the sciences, and we had all kinds of people all coming together around the theme of beauty. And it's global, right? We can have conversations across different cultures and faith and all the kinds of things that normally separate us, because we are converging in things that are beautiful and that move us. And then it can be very interdisciplinary, and this is some of the work that we're doing in our course, right? Where we have the scientific be caught up in the beautiful and yield something brand new in that dialogue. And with the sciences and theology, aesthetics becomes the connecting tissue where we can talk. And then, of course, we need to deal with urgent things. And this is coming up. My class and I are going to be being part of it, the Catholic, Jewish, and Women's Dialogue, Our Planet in Peril, right? How do we talk about something as urgent as that, or race relations or gender issues? Well, if we talk through aesthetic language about how it is that something affects us and how it makes us feel, then we'll be able to get a lot more done. So we have to dialogue, and then we have to imagine with the others, right? And always tending toward the common good, if we remember what Gaudium Spes told us. You with me so far? And then the expanse from the head to the heart. Because we can't just think faith. We can't just think faith. We can have a lot of beliefs that we can list, but they will not take us to faith. And my students took this wonderful photograph, right, of this tender African Madonna. And that moves us. It changes us, right? So whether our idea of worship is what John August Swanson gives us here in this explosion of Hispanic liturgy and music, or whether it's a very simple setting, both are valid. Both will speak. Both will reach us. And we will recognize ourselves in how they speak to us. And so we need to have that breadth and that openness so that we don't call one or the other the right way, but we connect it to the heart that's being moved by one or the other, and why that heart is being moved. Right? So for me, this does it, right? But for someone else, that may also be. And sometimes in my life, that may be what I need for my heart. So we have to attend, and in this expanse, we try to attend to the liturgy. We try to pay attention to music. We try to pay attention to how artful sacred spaces should be. It's not an add-on. It's not an extra for us to make spaces beautiful. It's necessary for the human creature to really be fulfilled, and we all long for it. So whether we are out doing one of our candlelight vigils, you know, or whether we are singing inside Sacred Heart Chapel, all of it is about involving our entire body and ourselves and our hearts in the worship of God and in the relationship to each other. So we can't just contain it to an hour a day someplace in a church where we just repeat prayers. It's a lot more than that, and it should permeate all of life. So to move the human heart, right, we have to teach others who are liturgical ministers and who work with communities how it is that we work with the artistic. We have to work with architects as they dream up new spaces. We have to work with symbols, right, at particular times of the year that will bring the community together. We have to work with the simplest things in life, with light and water and fire and all of the things that engage our senses, and of course with music. And it connects us then to that deep human level. Because really, you can't convince, or you shouldn't try to convince someone into belief, but you can have them fall in love and have an experience where they will want to return to that community and want to be part of it and its beauty. And especially with our young people. Our worship spaces and our teaching spaces should engage their entire bodies and their entire selves. And then the fifth of the expanses we want to cross, and this is really what began my journey. This was the main reason why I began this work. And that's the expanse to all who've been invisible. So for that, I'm turning it over to my students. Oh, where's it? She has. Oh, yeah, she has.
So we're members from Dr. Cecilia's class, Care of Our Common Home, and we have here some cuadros, which are handmade woven tapestries by women in a community called Pamplona Alto, which is a shanty town outside of Lima, Peru, and these were all handcrafted. So we're here to show you some of them and talk about them.
Yeah, so the idea of like reclaiming the voices of the invisible is that for me personally, when seeing this, I see the idea of reclaiming beauty, and amongst all the struggles, we see this idea of resilience, and this is really, like, if you look at this, it's called the harvest, and there's just an abundance of food and agriculture, and for people in these communities that don't have this abundance, but to still be able to dream about that abundance and then capture it in an artwork like this is just such a sign of like resilience, and a lot of these women are just so powerful, and it's just so easily seen in their artwork.
And it speaks a bit to their theology as well. As you can see in here, all the abundance is Christ's love in so many different ways, and the animals in the picture, it shows them in communion with the animals, with plants, with agriculture, and it shows that they have a very harmonious view of creation, and that it's not anthropocentric how a lot of people tend to view it, but they're with creation, working with it to make it better.
Yeah, so the cuadro that I had is called the Nativity, and it is obviously a depiction of Christ incarnate being born in what we could say is Lima, Peru, in their reality, and we can see that the three wise men are pictured bringing their precious gifts, but we also see that there is a woman, a Peruvian woman, perhaps the woman who created it, who placed herself within this reality, bringing her own gifts of oranges. And one of the things of emphasizing the importance of the theology of people who have been pushed to the margins, where they don't have books, they don't have writings, where this is how they share their theology with each other and also with us, because this is what we are able to hold and behold as far as what their theology looks like. And their theology is not something that is simply something that they read about or hear about at church. It is something that they are a part of, as we can see in the way that they incorporate themselves into it.
Okay, right here we have another cuadro titled Mujeres Trabajando, Women Working. And in this specific cuadro, we can see what's beautiful about it is the women depicting themselves as agents in their own community. The women in here are working, they're picking up the trash, they're working with the basureros, they're driving the trash trucks themselves, they're driving the water trucks as well. They have created a few different community centers, including El Centro de Ayuda para Mujeres, so the Women's Center for Help for Women. They also have an eating hall, and as well as a law center for women as well. So the question would become is, where are these women getting this sense of agency from? And with that, and from the previous quadros, we could see that the women can see the world as beautiful and can see creation as beautiful as well. And in that sense, if you can see the world as beautiful and the creation is beautiful, you are a part of creation, and they see themselves as a part of that same creation that is beautiful. And that is why they have that same sense of agency, because they are part of creation.
So this quadro, this makes me so nervous. I'll just forget. This quadro is called
So I also think it's important to note that these women have little to no education as well. So the fact that they can, because of their experience of seeing beauty in the world, they can project in these artworks the theology that many others, that most of us might not have access to unless we see them like we're seeing them right now. I think it's something that talks a lot about the kind of pieces that they create. And this one especially is called Selva, which translates to jungle. And what I really like about it is this like river that's kind of flowing across the cuadro, and it just reminds me of God as the everlasting fountain of life, and how we can see all these different types of plants and creatures all gathered around this river that is like kind of flowing across it, and how like we always just go back to this fountain of life, and how it is God who's nurturing us constantly, and how it's also seen in the beauty of nature that we oftentimes fail to acknowledge as well.
I think I'm just going to do the same thing.
No, because we want to hear you in the video.
In the video. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. So the image that I have displays a very blatant image of theology. It displays the image of San Martín de Porres by Enma. And really, the cuadros are all a living, breathing theology. As these women are creating, they are living out what they see as projection of what the divine should look like in our world. They're obviously not seeing that within the shanty towns that they do live in, but they know what it should look like. And with the image of San Martín de Porros, demonstrates that as a mulatto, or a man of a mixed race, he became a saint through his actions of caring for the sick, but also caring for the creatures of the world, including the animals that we see within the image. So really bringing together both the unity of creation within humanity and the creatures of this earth as one within the image.
So this is paradise as depicted by a woman named Veronica, and it's beautiful. And I think the image behind here is beautiful too, being that Veronica is one of these women that gets lost in our world, and is one of these forgotten poor. And we see Adam and Eve here, who are at one point lost as well, but they are still human, and they still existed in this beauty at one point. And just as these women are still human, and still are existent in the beauty of the world.
Thank you, class. And those of you who were able to be here a couple of years ago, we did have a huge exhibition on these the cuadros, which was an amazing experience for the library. So the voices, right? The voices of those who we wouldn't hear from unless we were looking at creative works, whether they're doing these textiles or they are passing along lullabies, they're telling stories, they're doing murals. They have been doing it since the dawn of creation, and we have perilously ignored what a lot of these voices are saying theologically and only looked at texts. And this is telling us the texts are everywhere. We just have to be willing to take a look and spend time with them. And it's like we've been looking at a little tiny corner of a garden and just didn't notice that it just goes on forever. And that's kind of what we have in creative work. So theological aesthetics really wants to recover these kinds of works, to give them prominence, to give them, as we say in theology, the gravitas, right? The strength and the authority that they deserve. Because the one that Deirdre showed with Paradise, I've actually written an article about. It's so complex and profound. So these women speaking to us. So thank you to the students in care of our common home. And this is why, right? The Christian theology is not complete and it's not coherent unless we're hearing from those who are God's most loved, who are the poor and the least. And how do we let them be heard? And how do we engage with them? This is what it helps us to do. And then we're going to talk about the sixth function, and this is the expanse back to ourselves and our own hearts. And for this, we're going to learn about the work of art with a work of art. And we're going to talk about the Last Supper, and I promised that we were going to bring something extraordinary out from our archives, and this is what it is. It's from the Robert and Miriam Kinsey collection, if you want to come get it. And it is called The Last Supper. And for that, first, as I say The Last Supper, I'm sure almost every single one of you got an image in your head. Right? How many people have an image in their heads right now? Okay, very good. And it's probably this one. Am I right? Am I right? Okay. The Last Supper, right, such a crucial piece of artistic history and theological depth that has been just, it is such a part of Western culture. So we're going to look at The Last Supper by Koto Okuda, and for that I'm going to invite Cynthia to help us, and then Marissa Muninal. As Cynthia said, Marissa was an undergraduate theology major, honors, and she wrote her senior thesis on this piece with me as her director. So, you know, she was already trying to do a PhD as an undergrad. And it is such a wonderful piece of research and writing that it actually was inducted into the library's archives and accompanies this artwork every time it's with it. So, Marissa, would you come up and join Cynthia? And I need to bring the microphone. So, Cynthia brought me this box, as she was saying, when I first came to LMU. And she brought this box out and she said, maybe you want to look at this. And it was a special, amazing moment. And so I won't show anything until we get to, okay? I will be over here. Oh, well, I got to hold this for you because you're going to need your hands.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Cecilia. Can you all hear me okay? Sorry,
Yeah.
I have my back to you over here, but I'll try to work my way around the room here. So part of what we wanted to do in introducing this piece to you all, which we're very excited to do tonight, is to also introduce the three functions of the aesthetic in relation to religious tradition. And so the first function Cecilia already mentioned, which is passing along a religious tradition from generation to generation. And so you can already see how that's being done with this piece by even just its name, The Last Supper. And so, as she mentioned, we have a number of images that already come to mind when we hear the words, The Last Supper. And I'd like to ask you to do just a really quick exercise before we move on to the second function. And just close your eyes for just a moment. And just think what other images or experiences come to mind when you hear the words, The Last Supper. And I don't want to make any assumptions about who's in the room. If you don't have any associations with those words, that's okay. But just take a moment to recognize what those words call to mind in you. Thank you. So as we can already tell, this work is speaking to that tradition and has something to say. It's doing a work along the lines of that tradition. And the second function of the aesthetic in relation to religious traditions is wrestling with that tradition, having the work help you somehow explore or encounter that tradition. And so we're going to take out the work now, and I'm going to at first not say anything about it and just let you encounter it and have your own interpretation, your own experience of the work. Do we have an image of it as well?
We will,
We'll show
yeah.
it. Okay.
So your gloves are there. She needs gloves.
So I hope you all can see at least a little bit from where you're sitting the piece that's in front of us, and we also have an image of it up on the screen for you. And so I invite you to look at it as a whole, whatever that might mean to you, and ask yourself what you see. And before I say anything about what maybe I see, I invite maybe any of you to offer your observations. If anyone would like to share. Yes, sir.
When I saw that broken glass, the fragility of life.
The fragility of life. Thank you.
What is left behind after a supper? Maybe even like the trash, or what's been the fruit that was considered not good enough to be eaten.
Very nice. Thank you. Aside from observations, what about experiences? What was your reaction when you first saw the pieces?
Well, first of all, I expected one piece to come out of the box. And then the first piece that came out was the broken glass, and that made me feel very surprised and engaged. And then, as each piece was so carefully placed by you, I was really intrigued by what I was seeing, and I just needed to completely readjust what I was thinking about and what I was expecting.
Thank you. Any other experiences? Yes.
What I originally took from that is that there's so much left over, and it seems almost like there was so much left unsaid or so much left to be a part. Like it kind of ended in a moment, and there's still so much that happened, and there's so much to happen.
Thank you. Carefully around the piece here.
The other feeling that I had was everything became very silent, and I was thinking that it was a sacred moment like the consecration. That was the experience that I had.
Wow, consecration. Thank you so much. Any other final thoughts, experiences, or observations?
When you first brought up the initial image that most of us think about of the Last Supper by Da Vinci, you look at a painting and you see an artist's representation of what I think this would look like. But then you see these different pieces of food that looks like I could eat it, or that food I would have eaten or could eat with my own friends or my own family. Then it is something that is not what an artist is portraying, but I see myself as part of it, not as something that I'm looking at, as something that I'm a part of.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, John.
I was surprised because when you first look at it, you don't. If it didn't have the words "the Last Supper," maybe you wouldn't start to work with it to develop it into that. But what it shows that you could. Like, there's one work that I did, it's a picnic, and people look at it and they say, oh, that's the Last Supper. But people are able to all of a sudden begin to construct and see things differently, that ordinary things. And these would be ordinary things that one would find at a table, but you might go to a dinner and then you see all these leftovers and things turned over and pieces of bread, and then you could start to see the Last Supper again. Yes.
Thank you so much, John. I think John said it all, so we're done. Have a good night. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
So maybe because I'm close, but this wine glass looks nicer than any wine glass I have in my cabinet. And it seems like a tragedy that it's broken, that this is something of some price and value that is now broken. And the image of the Last Supper, if the wine glass is the cup of new covenant, or a glass that's supposed to be celebrated in the kingdom of God as a celebration, to see it broke raises kind of a tragedy in my mind. Is this, have we broken faith with something, or has the vision not fully manifested itself?
You just blew my mind. Thank you. And our last comment.
Well, for me, the association with the Last Supper, I was thinking when I saw that broken glass, the last meal before execution.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So thank you again for your observations and your experiences. I wanted to allow you to encounter the piece without any preconceived ideas from me or from anyone else. So thank you for engaging in that second function, that wrestling with the tradition. Just a few observations, if you will. The glass, for example, Cecilia has shared an observation with me from another scholar that if you were to drink from that glass, what do you think that would happen? You would cut yourself, right? You would bleed. Just letting that sink in for you a little bit. That's incredibly significant, don't you think? I think, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Chris, what Chris shared touches on that, the brokenness, and how if you're encountering this piece, if you're drinking from the same cup that Christ drank from, you too will bleed. What an amazing statement, right? One other observation from a scholar, Francis Hioki, helped illuminate the melon for us. This is a melon called a prince melon, which already has so many connotations if you know that that's what it's called, right? And you can see it has this golden sticker on it. And we might not know what that symbolizes or what that says. I think it just says Prince Melon. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
Yes. So, but for me, like, what I initially thought of when I saw the melon for the first time was, that's the stone in front of the tomb that was rolled away. And so even with knowing that this is a Last Supper piece, you could already see the foreshadowing to the resurrection. And amidst all this brokenness and fracturing and piecemeal going on, there's still something whole and something beautiful going on. And so I want to just leave you with the piece and not say too much about it again, to let you have your own encounter, because the third function of the aesthetic is evoking experiences of wonder and awe. And so I hope that somehow in encountering this piece tonight, you've had your own experience of wonder and awe. And if not, that's okay. But I encourage you to find those moments, find those pieces, engage with the aesthetic in a way that allows you to have an experience of wonder and awe. So, thank you very much.
And I have to say that I'm extremely happy that Marissa has returned to us and is now doing her master's in theology. So it's a wonderful thing to have you back. So this is from my Meeting Christ in Faith and Art course, and the students here. That the power of the aesthetic, as John Paul II told us in the letter to the artist, really does go to the very core of being human. Okay? And that, as he says, we are called to make out of our own lives a work of art and a masterpiece. And that the arts reveal us, let us know each other and ourselves. So I'm going to, because this is a pub night, I'm going to just read a little tiny piece from the book, because that is kind of de rigueur. And then we will open it up to questions. Like symbol making, the work of theology is intricate and also quite natural. The great sources we read today as our primary theological texts were not academic exercises in their time, but rather the utterly real and deeply felt struggles of human beings with the questions of ultimate meaning. As we know, so is art, when it is honest and truthful. What the intermingling of the religious and the artistic provides is a view of how preceding generations struggled with questions very similar to ours. Our creative ancestors engaged in symbol making and decoding in ways that embodied their struggles, making them tactile and felt. What such intimacy with them, as provided by art, can do is to offer us their accompaniment and insights, emboldening us to take a chance and to ask difficult questions using our creative faculties. There we go.
So if anybody wants to begin with any question, I'll be more than happy to bring the microphone over to you. Any takers?
Somehow that broken glass still resonates within me. And I'm just wondering about the artists what brought that image up that you wanted to symbolize that in the broken glass. That somehow is a powerful, powerful symbol for me, and it's still going around within me. Of all the elements, that one just is very powerful.
So we don't know too much about this artist other than he's Japanese, and that this was a work of art that was donated to the university. He normally works in miniatures, right, Cynthia, in what are called the Netsuke. And the reason, pretty much, we just have a little description that says this is the Last Supper, and this is the artist, and not much else. And there's actually a value to that, because as John will be the first one to tell you, he never wants to explain his art, or as my friend Sarah, who's a poet, will tell you, right? You take it, and now it's yours. And as we've learned in class, right, the art has its own life, right? Has its own life. And so sometimes I think it's good for us to step back from what we know about the artist and all of that, and just have that just intimate experience, as you've said, this broken glass, and I love that Marissa placed the glass down, yeah. When we took that photograph, that was actually for our former president, Father Lawton, and he wanted it because we took him and gave him a little tour and showed him this work. He wanted it photographed so he could take it with him for his prayer time when he traveled, because he found it so powerfully evocative that he wanted it as kind of a portable altar like the medievals would do with this particular work. Other questions, comments? Brett. My colleague Brett Hoover.
Thank you, Cecilia. Just in your presentation, but also in Marissa's directions for us, and in that experience of this particular work of art, I kept making a connection in my head to this ongoing thing with the Bellarmine Forum about slow time, and thinking, and perhaps I'm projecting from my own place of anxiety, but But I think, but in order to have that kind of experience, my sense is that it requires time and focus, and a little bit of walling us off from the worries of our lives. So I wonder if you might speak to that a little bit.
Well, as the Meeting Christ in Faith and Art class knows, there's some other principles that we work with, and the ones that come from Austin, right, guys? And one is being in the present moment. That's his very first principle, and it is this stop, this make yourself present, just let yourself be surprised, get rid of all your preconceptions, and he says, and the only way you will know if you've achieved that is by what happens. That's when you'll know if you've been truly present and you've taken the time to, and you know, I get asked all the time, how did you define art? And I won't define it because it's needs to be that expansive and amazing. But one thing I can say about it, and the students all know, it's a relationship. It's a relationship. And so in order to have a relationship, right, you have to stop, be present, engage, and then embrace the mystery of the other, which is the second principle that we get from Austin. And you will know it because you've made yourself present. So, yeah.
So, Cecilia, I have a question for you, actually. So the words theological aesthetics, when did that first appear in your life? Like, what moment or what gave it rise? Like, when did it first appear? Did you hear it somewhere else, or did it just what was happening in your life when that clicked and you decided to pursue that?
Well, I mean, obviously, I was in graduate school, and I was very intrigued, actually, by the work of the great poet Federico Garcia Lorca. That was one of the things I wanted to work with in my doctorate. And I was running from my program was jointly the Graduate Theological Union at UC Berkeley, literally crossing Hearst Street. And I would run from one side to the other, right? And I'd be at UC Berkeley with all the Lorca scholars talking about poetry and about his work, and then I'd run back to the Graduate Theological Union, and I'd be with all the theologians talking. And I sat down with my director, Alex Garcia Rivera of blessed memory, and he said, you know what I need you to work on? Method. We don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know. We have no idea. He says, that's what I want your dissertation to be. I want you to work on how do we do this work? How do we create all of these relationships? And so between him and my co-director at UC Berkeley, Lorca scholar Drew Doherty, then we began developing a way for me to do all this research and theological aesthetics, meaning the theology within that which moves us. What's it saying about God? How's it speaking? That was the question. Does that make sense? I know it's like, sometimes it's like, you know, this really specialized language, and I don't want it to be. Because it really is something you're doing all the time. It's just we gave it a name. But you're involved in it all of the time. And every time that you felt moved, every time your eyes have filled up with tears, every time you've gotten a knot in your throat, every time you've just been in front of a John August Swanson work and just been like, how did he do that? You know, you're engaged in it.
Going once, going twice. All right. So if there are no more questions, again, I wanted to thank Professor Cecilia González-Andrieu.
And let me say one more thing before Ray takes it over. The women want you to look at them and touch them. They're not untouchable. So we'll have them up here. If you want to come and take a close look and touch them, the students will have them up here.
Thank you, Cecilia. So there's also a couple of more people that I wanted to thank. So Marisa, I wanted to thank you. Cecilia, I wanted to thank all of your students as well. Did a great job, students. I also wanted to thank my library outreach teammates, John Jackson and Carol Raby, and Morgan for putting on this event tonight. Again, there is a book sale and book signing towards the back where the other painting is located as well. And once again, if you fill out those feedback forms and include your email address, you will be entered into that Amazon gift card raffle. Okay. You could either leave them on your chair, or if you want to walk them over to the counter, there's a plastic box where you could insert them as well. And the bar will close at 7 o'clock, so we have about 10 minutes of mingling ahead of us if you want. Thank you, everybody.